Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Syria Face to Face. This is live Facebook video, episode 7, where I'll be talking again about Syria, but also some other issues as well tonight as we answer frequently asked questions. You know, I've been at this now for several years. I started researching Syria back in 2012 and been basically researching it all day, every day ever since, and have made 6 trips over there during the course of the war. Starting in May 2016, I spent several weeks there, about 3 weeks or more each trip, and I try to go every 6 months. And my particular focus is trying to get with as many Syrian people as possible from as many different backgrounds as possible, and to relay what I've learned both in my own research and on the ground there to people in America and around the world, because the media reports have been, in my opinion, so misleading and have really contributed to this conflict lasting as long as it has. And welcome, everyone. Wow, I'm really thrilled to see so many people on so quickly. Really appreciate you joining me. So tonight we're going to answer some frequently asked questions that I've had over these years of research. And but I'd like to start with a story from Damascus first. And this was from my last trip. And I had gone with a friend in the old city to a local bar, and it was karaoke night. And the bar, you know, there were several people in the bar, quite a few people. It's a small bar, though. And, you know, I was sipping mojitos, and there were some flaming B-52s involved at some point. You know, I don't get drunk. I like having a little cocktail now and then. But it was so much fun because the karaoke was going on, and all the people knew all the words to the songs. These were American and European classic rock and modern pop, what have you. And everybody was singing along and just having a great time. But the song that got everybody fired up the most, honest to goodness, was Frank Sinatra singing My Way. And, you know, at one point you had people just standing up and singing their heart out, you know, I did it my way. And it was just a great night. And it just reminded me that Syria really has gone through not just the last 8 years, but throughout the course of its history, for the most part, they've done it their way. And this is one of the biggest issues surrounding this current war, is Syria wants to exist as a country their way. They want to choose. The people of Syria, the leader, the army, they have drawn a line in the sand and said to the United States of America and all our various allies that they will decide who the leader of their country will be, and they will decide who their alliances will be with, and they will decide what they're going to do with their own country's natural resources, and they will decide their role in the region, and no one else is going to determine that for them. That's not only Syria's enemies right now, which we'll go into later, but primarily the U.S., Israel, the European Union, many of the countries of the European Union, etc., and regional players like Saudi Arabia and some of the other Gulf states and Turkey, but also their friends. Syria is not a proxy of anybody, and Syria will make its own decisions and decide its own future. They appreciate the help of their allies, Russia and Iran, Hezbollah, etc. But Syria will decide its future, and that's what's really been the primary issue at stake in many ways throughout the course of this conflict, and I think you'll understand that more as we go on. The first question I wanted to address, hello everyone, great to see you. The first issue or question I want to address came up recently as Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii. Of course, she's a veteran of the Iraq War. She sits on the Foreign Relations Committee and Armed Services Committee of the House of Representatives. She's currently, I believe, a captain in the Army Reserve. I'm not quite sure about that. But she traveled to Syria a few years ago on a fact-finding mission of her own, met with President Assad, the leader of Syria, and she has been very consistently telling the truth about that conflict. And she's been getting hammered for it, crucified, often by big headliners in the press and some within the government, etc. And she put out a bid. She's running for a candidate for president. And she was on the Morning Joe show for MSNBC recently and absolutely dumbfounded the hosts of that program when she said that President Assad is not an enemy of the United States of America. They were actually flabbergasted. And when you see a reaction like that from, so-called journalists, those of us who understand the situation to great, to a certain extent, realize that none of those people have any clue whatsoever about the reality of the conflict there, just on the basis of their reaction to her saying that. And this is why. Because, of course, President Assad of Syria as a country, as a government, as a legitimate, sovereign, independent nation state, has never declared war against the United States of America. The U.S., in fact, has never declared war against Syria. And yet we have this war. In fact, President Assad only wanted good, mutually beneficial relations with the West, including the United States of America. And before the war, he was working with U.S. oil companies for contracts. He was welcoming investment from the West and businesses coming in from the West. One of the things that was really is near and dear to his heart, as I was explaining last week, the devotion and commitment to having quality education for all of the people in Syria, was he wanted Western teachers and professors to come live in Syria and teach in Syria. But in the mid-2000s, one of the things the U.S. did after declaring Syria part of the axis of evil, in those days, around 2004, I guess, was they put sanctions against the country, and it really made it very difficult for any foreigner from the West to go live there and have bank accounts and things like that. So we actually made that dream of his very hard to achieve. But there were many Western teachers there and Westerners visiting and living in Syria. President Assad is not an enemy of the United States. The exact opposite is true. The exact opposite is what has really occurred, and this is since the mid-2000s, the U.S. government, with allies, has been deliberately and systematically trying to undermine the government of Syria. And this is not a shock or a surprise. Christiane Amanpour went to Damascus in 2005 and said to President Assad, the U.S. is literally already picking out new leaders for Syria. They're going to get rid of you. So this is something that has been building for many years and erupted into violence in 2011. After the violence began in 2011, one of the things that I want to talk about to illustrate just how terrible an enemy the United States is towards Syria as a country and the Syrian people, in addition to the horrific sanctions that was making life difficult already. But by 2012, as I started researching it, I started researching it in November of 2012, but in August of 2012, Foreign Policy, of all magazines, published an article by a fellow named Gary Gambill. It came out on August 23rd, 2012, and the title of the article was "Two Cheers for Syrian Islamists." And he might have just as well used the word Syrian terrorists. Two cheers, woo! And the whole article is talking about how the so-called rebels are not secular, they're not moderate. He says they aren't secular Jeffersonians, but as far as America is concerned, it doesn't much matter. And he goes on to say how the political opposition supported by the U.S. and European Union is dominated by the Muslim Brotherhood. Apparently that's no big deal to Foreign Policy magazine. And he says that the Salafi jihadist groups are the main force on the ground, that even the so-called moderate Free Syrian Army, the commanders are calling for Syrians to go on jihad, to gain an afterlife in heaven, that this was very disconcerting. And even though this won't be a picnic, quote unquote, for the Syrian people, it has important silver linings for U.S. interests. So what I'm trying to tell you is, it's not just some American housewife sitting at her computer. It's not just random political activists around the world. It's not just tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists saying that the so-called moderate rebels are in fact and have always been terrorists. The United States government knew full well what they were supporting. President Obama, Hillary Clinton, and then John Kerry after her, the CIA, the Pentagon, State Department, these people knew very well that they were promoting, supporting, giving communications support to, intelligence support to, providing weaponry to. They knew full well that these people were terrorists that were going to make life hellish for the Syrian people. And they went ahead and did it anyway. They knew this full well. And so what I'm asking is for people in America, people in Europe, I'm an American, I'll talk mostly to Americans. If you have it in your mind that the U.S. government has ever or does want anything good for the Syrian people in all of this intervention that we've done in Syria, I want you to just take that thought and kill it and put it on a big funeral pyre and burn it until it is ash that can be sent as dust in the wind, never to be resurrected again, because at no time has concern for the Syrian people, has bringing freedom and democracy, has been freeing them from a so-called brutal dictator, ever been a part of the calculations or the decisions that have gone into this intervention. And so please just remove that from your mind. I have hundreds of verifications of this, and I'm not the only one saying this. I just wrote a post not too long ago about people, retired military officers, including generals and colonels, special forces guys, veteran, senior Pulitzer Prize winning investigative journalists, people across the spectrum have been saying this all along, but those voices are never heard on mainstream media. And so this is one of the reasons why I, as a nobody, decided to really take this on and go to Syria and make sure and confirm that what I believed was true, what's reality on the ground. And I confirmed, it was confirmed for me again and again and again and again, continually. And so, what I'm trying to tell you is this war not only was fabricated by the U.S. against a sovereign state that is no threat, never has been a threat, didn't want to be a threat to the U.S. And in order to overthrow this government that refused to be our puppet, that refused to accept our dictates, again, of issues that were against Syria's interests itself, that we literally have been aiding and abetting legions of terrorist groups in Syria, and in fact been assisting both Al-Qaeda and ISIS there. So the question is President Assad an enemy of the United States? The answer is no. It is the United States of America that is the enemy of Syria. Question 2 I was going to talk about for a little bit is President Assad killing and gassing his own people? And this is another one of those things that, has raised so much concern amongst people and taken so much time and effort to investigate. Really, when you understand the nature and character of these so-called rebels that have been supported by the U.S. and all of our allies, different allies sponsor different terrorist groups there. And you can even we've had the Pentagon sponsoring one terrorist group and the CIA sponsoring another terrorist group, and those two actually fighting each other. Then you have Saudi Arabia sponsoring some groups, and Turkey and Qatar and Israel, and it's just we just created this intense chaotic violence there by funding and arming all these various groups. Literally, if you have 2 or more Islamists, and by Islamists I mean fundamentalist extremists that want to kill people that don't believe exactly as they do, if you have 2 or more of them in a room, honestly, you have a war. You have a fight. That is not true of the people in general of the region, and I'm actually going to go into that a little bit later. Is President Assad killing and gassing his own people? The answer is no, of course not. This has been a war in Syria also of hearts and minds of the Syrian people. And guess who has won that war? That would be the president and army of Syria. And the way that they did it was being constant, consistent, of looking both not only on the war in political terms, in terms of they want me to restart my PC right now. Not only in political terms via conferences and peace talks and things like that, but in military terms as well. But also, so there's that short-term look of battling these terrorist groups and winning this war, but also the long-term effect on Syria itself. So the focus has always been on unifying the country, on supporting all of the religious groups, on helping everyone, trying to get through this crisis, and really working together. And, so it's been a battle of hearts and minds, and going around gassing women and children in areas in ways that offer no possible military benefit, political benefit, any other kind of benefit is stupid. And the Syrian president and the Syrian army are not stupid. They've actually proven, over the course of the 8 years that they, with their allies, have managed to defeat half the world's countries going against them. And part part of the way that they've been victorious in that is because they're smart. And it would be very stupid, literally each time we've heard about one of those alleged chemical weapons attacks happening, it's been when the Syrian army has great momentum. They're making victory after victory. They're ready to take over, whatever last stronghold they're working on at the time of all these terrorist groups. And, we're supposed to believe the guy just goes off his rocker and, uses sarin or chlorine gas against women and children in order to get the U.S. and their allies to launch missiles against him or to turn the Syrian people against him. It's nonsense. You have to ask yourself who benefits. And who benefits from making allegations of chemical weapons attacks are these terrorist groups that the U.S. and allies have been supporting. Because then they can say, oh, we're the good guys, as they go. I'm sorry to laugh, but it just gets so absurd. As they go around literally beheading, torturing, kidnapping, mass murdering, suicide bombing, and yes, chlorine attacks, looting, raping, killing their way around safe and secular Syria. As I said last week, Syria was the 5th safest country in the world. They never had any terrorist attacks before 2011 when the U.S. decided to bring freedom and democracy to Syria by Al-Qaeda and ISIS and other terrorist groups. They didn't have mass killings. They didn't have torture. They didn't have kidnappings. This all came as a result of this intervention that we call for freedom and democracy. I mean, it's really that silly. So now, this last chemical weapons attack in Douma, a BBC producer said he's been investigating that attack for 6 months and he could prove that it's a total fake, which was a shocker coming from BBC because they've been supporting these terrorist groups for the most part throughout these 8 years. Ian Wilkie in Newsweek magazine wrote a very important article where he talked about General Mattis actually admitting that there's no evidence that President Assad and the Syrian army used chemical weapons in those attacks. One of the things that is important to understand is that many voices have been saying what I'm saying. So it's not just me and, like I said, other activists. Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, regarding the first alleged chemical weapons attack, when he was asked if President Assad had done it, he just said it's bull. It is bull. That's the word for it. These are all stunts to try to get the American people to think President Assad is a monster, and so he's got to be removed from office. That's all it is. It's propaganda to make you think a man who's not a monster is a monster, so you'll support all this insanity of the U.S. arming, training, funding terrorists, in addition to punishing the people with terrible sanctions, etc., to get you to support this action. And this is why I'm so passionate about this. It's a grotesque con job that's been put on the American people and people in the West to get them to support this brutal, terrible, disastrous regime change attempt. We talked about who benefits with the chemical weapons allegations. It's not President Assad, of course. It's these so-called rebels who are terrorists. Why did Syria have chemical weapons in the first place? This is also important to understand. Syria had chemical weapons because no other country is allowed in the region to have any nuclear weapons other than Israel, that has 70 to 300 nuclear warheads in their illegal program, that they actually stole weapons-grade uranium from the U.S. to start this program. They also have a biological and chemical weapons programs, none of which they will sign any treaties for. So the other countries in the region know very well that Israel's leaders, most of them, have long wanted to expand Israel's power in the region, to take control of Lebanon, for example, Syria, much of Iraq, much of Jordan as well. And so these countries want deterrence. And this is the primary reason, this is why Syria had chemical weapons. And President Assad has been very open to talk about this. He acknowledged that they had them. And he said those were for if an invading army comes over our border and we need that to defend our existence, we would have to use them. But he's also been very open and honest, saying, we wouldn't use them in a civilian area because that's stupid. And, we wouldn't use them against our own people because that's not who we are. And the proof of that statement of his is Palmyra. Palmyra is in the middle of the desert. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's a fabulous archaeological site it's a huge Roman city that's been preserved through the ages. Only ISIS was there. They had taken over these ruins. On their second takeover, they were actually systematically destroying these precious remnants of the past. And it would have been the ideal scenario for using chemical weapons to wipe out those ISIS fighters without damaging that site that is so critical to Syria. I mean, they received millions of visitors there a year. It was a huge financial tourist destination for them. So what I'm trying to say is these chemical weapons allegations are very obvious, really quite juvenile frame jobs. There have been times when they aren't just total fakes, where people were killed to create those videos and that supposed evidence. The rebel terrorists have a huge number of kidnapped victims that they have taken over the years. We're talking thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people, mostly women and children, and quite a few women and children, but also men, like soldiers that they hold to try to do prisoner swaps and things with. So they have a ready, available stock, if you will, of victims to use to create a false flag or a frame job. What I'm trying to say is these so-called rebels, these terrorists, they would lie as easily as they would drink a glass of water. If you're capable of beheading a young child or teaching a young child how to behead somebody else, if you are sending in your own children, like the father did in Damascus, he sent his young girl into the police station as a suicide bomber. If you're capable of that kind of activity, you're capable of lying and saying, look, there was a chemical weapons attack, against women and children here. You have to understand the nature and character of the two primary fighting forces. We have the Syrian Arab Army and we have the terrorist rebels. And the Syrian Arab Army, as areas get liberated, the people run to the Syrian Arab Army. The people run away from rebel terrorists. And this is what people have to understand, the basic reality of what's going on the ground. And just to finish up this very brief talk about chemical weapons use allegations in Syria, for the U.S. to pretend that this is some kind of red line for them, I find abominable. Honestly, this is an abomination. In the late 1980s, we helped Saddam Hussein, who was our guy in Iraq at that time, launch chemical weapons attacks against Iran The estimates I saw range from 100,000 to 150,000 people killed in those attacks. Foreign Policy, the same magazine that wrote about, 2 cheers for Syrian Islamists, they were the ones that said CIA files document how the U.S. helped Saddam Hussein launch some of the worst chemical weapons attacks in history against Iran. We're still using white phosphorus. We're still using depleted uranium. We napalmed and used Agent Orange in Vietnam. We napalmed Korea. For the U.S. government to pretend that it holds some kind of moral high ground when it comes to the use of chemical weapons is absurd. I hope that I'm making some sense here. As we're talking about the nature and character of these so-called rebels that I call terrorists, and most Syrians call terrorists, and the Syrian government and the Syrian Arab Army and the Syrian leader, I want to quote a friend of mine, Mr. Adel Soleiman. And he was asked, he's Syrian, he lives in Tartus, he's a professor at a university, and he was asked in a private message from somebody, "You're a Syrian citizen, can you just tell me, how do you really see President Bashar al-Assad?" And he said, he actually posted the answer in a public post and said he wants to answer this in public. As a Syrian citizen, he said, Bashar al-Assad is a great leader. He is the leader of independence, the leader of tolerance, the leader of humanity and beauty, the leader of dignity. He is a gorgeous president and the most loved leader on earth. He is civilized. He is emotional and grave. He is a real knight, K-N-I-G-H-T. Great father, passionate husband, great brother. The real, honest Syrians want him to be their everlasting president. This is the eye of the collective Syrian conscience. And I have run into many people who share those views about President Assad in Syria. I've also encountered people that support President Bashar because these so-called rebel terrorists were so horrific that they couldn't possibly support them, and where the Syrian government is in control in Syria. Life is stable. People are much safer now than they have been since the beginning of the war. People are opening businesses, etc. I've talked about that in other talks. But there are many, many people who genuinely adore this president and his wife. And people that I've met in Syria, and often, again, these are random personal encounters. I don't have a video camera going on them. I'm not, with or without government representatives, often just on my own, literally very private conversations, getting told the exact same thing. And another person that I wanted to quote is my friend Lily. She's an American. She's one of my heroes. She's lived in Syria for decades. Brilliant lady, very brave, courageous lady. And she says, I'm a Syrian living in Syria 27 years. I could live anywhere. And with the conflict, we considered it, she and her husband, if we should leave. She says it was only because President Assad is so strong and resistant that we decided to stand with him and never leave. We have lost our home. Their home was destroyed in an attack, and many friends and neighbors, but we still have faith that we can live in peace again. I was walking around Damascus, old Damascus, on Palm Sunday, and I ran into a young lady in a cafe. I was just kind of going table to table in a cafe. I've actually shared this story before, but I think it's important. This young woman had been shot twice by rebel terrorists. Her best friend, they were just walking to university. Her best friend was kidnapped in that attack. Never heard from her best friend again or seen her. The young lady holds dual citizenship. So she has a passport. She has a Greek passport and a Syrian passport because one of her parents was Greek. And she could leave any time. And so I said, why are you still in Syria? And she said, as long as President Assad is here, I will never leave. So why is that? She said, because he had so many opportunities he could have taken. He had a blank check by countries in the Gulf to take his family and get out. But he stayed, and he stood by his people, he and his wife. And she said, as long as he's here, I'm going to stay. And so you have that level of devotion among people. And again, I have to stress that the people in Syria are not insulated and isolated. They all have cell phones. They all have access, they have open, total access to the internet. Many of them, again, speak English, French, German, etc. They know everything that the Western governments and media have been saying. So it's not like they've been closed off and they've never heard any of these accusations or anything. It's actually a very bitter joke there. People have lots of complaints about the government. The government using chemical weapons attacks against women and children is like a terrible, bitter joke because it's just ridiculous. And this is one of those things that is so important to be on the ground, because a lot of activists, of course, around the world know this. They've studied it very carefully. It's very obvious to them, and that's great. But for people that are kind of like, I don't know, you're just kind of, you're biased, you're this, you're that. If I were to take you and put you on the ground in Syria and let you run around and talk to people, you would know the truth in about 24 to 48 hours. And I've seen this happen again and again because, like I said, I bring in tour groups of people into Syria. And some of the people have been kind of not really sure what's happening. And we're reading things like, against, for the rebels and all this stuff. And it doesn't take long. It takes a day, maybe a couple days for people to see how obvious the reality is there. Let's see, how are we doing in time? Oh, 5:39. Okay, got several more questions to go through. Third question I wanted to hit is, why should I believe you, not CNN, Fox News, New York Times, BBC, etc.? Well, I mean, how many times, folks, are you going to let them lie to you to get you to support these wars? The media, was all over the WMD's in Iraq story. New York Times editors had to apologize for how they cherry-picked through stories to support that false narrative, to get you to support all of us, to support this disastrous, total failure war in Iraq. As far as Syria goes, the guy, one of the most celebrated, awarded journalists for Der Spiegel in Germany, was just outed as a total fake. He absolutely just faked stories that he won award after award for. It was a big scandal in Germany. Early on in the war, there was the famous Gay Girl in Damascus, and Gay Girl was blogging and writing these courageous articles about how the brutal, ruthless Assad regime was killing everybody and putting everybody in prison. Well, that, again, was a total fake. It's some guy, middle-aged guy somewhere, absolutely just faking the whole thing. Wasn't in Syria, never been in Syria. You had the little girl, Bana, in East Aleppo, that was Jake Tapper, CNN's sweetheart, little 8-year-old Bana, the daughter of two jihadis. Literally, her father was an active fighter in terrorist groups there, and little Bana, turned out she didn't speak English, but she could write the most beautiful, eloquent tweets calling for World War III to start, to end the brutal Assad regime, etc. White helmets, we've talked about them. White helmets are a propaganda construct created by a British mercenary guy, and, their whole purpose is to make terrorists look good and to make people in the West think these terrorist rebels are the good guys. They're not the good guys. They're terrorists. I'm sorry, So you can continue to believe the lies of mainstream media, or you can wake up to the fact that every single intervention war that we've been about has been a total disaster, that have cost us trillions of dollars, that have cost us the lives of thousands of Americans, in addition to the millions of innocents that we've killed in these countries, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Yemen, etc. Or you can wake up and start asking some real questions. Sorry, I'm kind of flying through these things. I hope this is making sense to people. It's kind of hard just answering things on so many different topics, but we can always go back, ask your questions, and if I don't answer them tonight, I'll go back tomorrow and answer them all. But that leads me to another question of, what about Yemen and other conflicts in the Middle East? And I really want to talk about Yemen for a minute, especially. What is happening in Yemen is, the words humanitarian disaster do not describe this or any of these wars. They're just catastrophic. And what's happening in Yemen is that Saudi Arabia and its partners are literally slaughtering and starving Yemen to death. And it has nothing to do with Iran. Really, what it has to do with is certain powers. So this is the U.S., Israel, Saudi Arabia primarily. Hi, honey. Want to control the entirety of the Middle East, politically, economically, all of the resources, etc. They just want a total, absolute stranglehold on the entire region. And there are certain things in certain places that are crucial to that control. So they want to control the region and the profits of the natural resources of the region and the importance of the natural resources. So the gas and oil, the petroleum, that is the life's blood of the industrial world and the global economy, they want to control that. And so they've kind of banded together and, they've set about kind of destroying anything in their way of that total control, because they want control. They want China and Russia to have no control and no part in the region. That's really what it all comes down to. And Yemen is significant mostly because of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. And that's the route, the sea route that goes from the Persian Gulf, all that oil, up through the Suez Canal and up to Europe. And so they want to absolutely gain full control over that pivotal piece of land and water. That's really one of probably the primary driving force behind Saudi Arabia and all its allies really just doing this mass murder in Yemen with the full blessing and cooperation of the US, UK, UAE, Bahrain, Egypt, and Pakistan. And in fact, what is interesting is an article came out today in Haaretz from Israel, and they wrote an article about how Israel is an unofficial partner in the devastation in Yemen. Israeli cyber companies, gun traders, terror warfare instructors, and even paid hitmen operated by an Israeli-owned company are partners to the war in Yemen. it's always the same basic three. It's always U.S. and it's kind of Western partners, so that includes U.K., etc., Israel and Saudi Arabia. I'm going to take a breather here because my husband has arrived with one question we're going to answer that's like a fun question at the end. Yes, please.
Hello,
We're going to take a little break. Talk about something more fun. This is my husband, Sid, by the way. And each week we've been trying to introduce people to a little different aspect of Syrian culture or things that you will experience if you're over there. So we had coffee and tea and mate and arak. And this week is something that might be a little controversial. We're not trying to tell people, to encourage people to smoke, but we wanted to share this with you tonight.
Oh, hogwash, honey. Get rid of that political correctness and move over.
Okay.
Well, don't move out of the screen.
Well, here comes the amateur part of the hour for all of us.
There we go. Good evening and happy Sunday, one and all. Just to put a dot the T and cross the I about what my wife was talking about, you can always say just follow the money. Follow the money, honey.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. This is a bubbler or a hookah.
Or an argili.
Or an argili, a water pipe. And it contains tobacco, but a tobacco that has been moistened, flavored, scented. This particular one is a, where's the camera? Lemon mint. And 2 apples is very popular. And on the bottom is a glass container with water in it. Then you have a long tube. The bowl is at the top. It's called shisha, is in the bowl. Then there's aluminum foil, few holes in it, and a charcoal on top. I lit this about 15 minutes ago. Everyone in this country, no, excuse me, didn't say that. What's the hurry? You set the thing up, you put the charcoal on. It takes 10 minutes, 15 minutes for it to really get going. It's a very social, communal part of life. We don't smoke it often, but we keep it in the living room. If you ever come over to visit, we'll have coffee, shisha if you want. We're easy.
Everybody smokes it over there, just about, men, women. You know, it's just very common. The cafes will be filled with the vapor from the shisha, from the argilis.
Jan came back, so first trip, I think it was her first trip ever into Syria. And she's just describing the restaurant, just everything, the family, the restaurant, the hookahs that are around. And there's a man who carries live charcoal in a little urn. And he'll come and attend your pipe. And he'll take off or knock off the older charcoals and keep you lit, keep the fire going. And an old established man of this position is referred to as the sheikh. And Jan was having a wonderful time talking to this older sheikh. And
just a fun old guy, and he said he wanted to move to Canada, and I said, but Sheikh, you know, it's cold in Canada. And he said, oh, that's even better. I can keep all the women warm there. You know, so he was a great guy, and I got used to getting my shisha taken care of by him.
And the next day, Jan's back in the same place, and everything's going as normal. And when she turned to think the sheikh was next to her, it was a young boy, 8, 9?
8, 9, or 10, something.
You know,
like that.
he's doing the charcoal. You know, training starts young.
Yes, very professional too, I have to say.
So the way I put it is, if you're going to say the Surgeon General, let's just say the Surgeon General, I don't think has a bubble pipe, so he hasn't commented on this one yet.
It is just as dangerous as smoking cigarettes or anything else. So while we're enjoying a little bit of shisha here, we're going to finish this up. It's 5:52, and we've been answering frequently asked questions. I hope that I've addressed some things about that. I talk in pretty general terms here on these videos just because, you know, I have all of these verifications on my website, Syria Resources Archive. But you know, it's more important because so many Americans especially are so completely ignorant of what Syria is like or what's really been happening over the course of the conflict. I find that it seems to be more effective to speak in simple, basic terms, trying to get the main points across again and again and again. So if I keep repeating myself, I'm sorry to those of you who are familiar with the situation, but I'm trying to reach, you know, new people with these videos. You know, one of the questions that I get asked, or statements that are told me all the time, is the people over there, you know, want us all dead, or there are people over there who want us all dead. And so we have to attack them first. We have to defend ourselves. This is not a chicken or the egg situation, folks. We moved into the region with like gangbusters in the late 40s after World War II. We've been going about trying to control it ever since, through arranging and manufacturing coups, through covert operations, special forces, CIA operations, etc., and through military operations. We also, you know, have engaged in warfare in other ways, the economic warfare, propaganda, so-called diplomacy that we've used. It's all been geared around trying to control and dominate this region, and we've left a swath of death and destruction, chaos. We've increased the violence in the region. There's more terrorists now than ever. And like I said, in Libya and Syria, especially, also Iraq, we were often sponsoring the terrorists there. So we haven't done anything good, and it's time to change this because it's destroying our economy. You know, these wars have cost us $5.6 trillion, several trillion more are missing from, you know, are unaccounted for by the Pentagon. Like I said, we've sacrificed thousands of American lives as well. It's time to really examine this and to do things differently. And that leads us to the last question. Is a lot of people, I think a lot of my friends who are on here, you know, we just hate these wars. We've really come to just be burning in anger and rage and frustration and sadness. And, you know, we've lost friends by trying to speak out about it. We've been called every name in the book. You know, there's been a personal cost. But the question is always, what can we do? What can we do? You know, we're up against mainstream media. We're up against the government, the military, industrial intelligence complex of the United States, and the globalists, you know, including people, the governments and media in the UK, in the EU, in Europe, in Australia, for Pete's sakes, in Canada. We're just up against huge powers that have massive wealth. And, you know, to them, we're like little ants running around going, you know, squeaking. You know, they're starting to pay attention, and this is why we're starting to get censored and all of that. But what can we really do? And, you know, all I keep coming back to is what we've been doing, which is just this constant, consistent, fact-based, bridge-building-based idea of communicating one to another, to another, to another, to another. We have to circumvent the mainstream media and just reach as many people as we can. Someone, though, in Norway just did a brilliant thing. Hold on. Had to do one. They actually, and I'll be posting about this with the name of the group and the people that organized it, but they actually sponsored Vanessa Beeley and Eva Bartlett and Patrick Henningsen to go to Oslo and give a fabulous conference that just laid out these factual presentations about all of these topics. That was an absolutely brilliant piece of work, organization. I know it took them a long time to do that, but they were successful in doing that. So that was a brilliant thing that they were able to do. My advice is spend a half an hour every day, literally just Google the word Syria or Assad or whatever, and look at what all the mainstream media sources of the day, and just go out there and comment on as many as you possibly can, whether it's on Twitter or Facebook or directly on the website of the media. Do not let them get away with publishing false information without providing rebuttal based on facts. And then you can actually call for people to boycott CNN, Fox News, whoever you want, MSNBC, for their ridiculous reporting.
And it really, it's a common practice speaking the truth in love. It's as soon as your voice changes, as soon as you get attacking, you're not listening. You're not being listened to anymore.
Yeah.
It's let them attack back, be quiet, stay on the point, because all they'll want to do is defame your character, because they cannot debate the facts. Then they go for the character.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And, we all get frustrated, as we've all shared many times, just absolutely blind, fuming, steam coming on our ears. We can't take it anymore. And, we all get frustrated with people. I'm not talking about how you talk to trolls. You can talk to trolls however you want. But, really just always seek out, instead of like Star Trek where they sought out new life and new civilizations, seek out new contacts, new people and new audiences, and try to convey some of these truths. And just slowly attack the media, go after the media, make sure that people, at least if they're reading the comments, will see some truth. Call your representatives and senators on a constant basis. Put a little, note in your, a tickler in your smartphone to call them once a week or once a month to reiterate this message to them. And I personally have found it very effective in my own activism to focus as much on the positive as I do on the negative, because for me, what is essential to really getting the truth out is two parts. First, you have this idea of unbrainwashing people who have come to think of people in the Middle East as less than human, and it's horrifying. But to show the people over there who they are, the beauty of their countries and their cultures, the smiles, the kids, the parents that love their children, the food. There's so much to be amazed at, whether it's Iran or Yemen. Even with all the suffering and the war going on, there's still many positive things that happen, positive aspects that can be talked about. And I urge everyone, and I've seen this a lot of people do this, which I think is really effective. And then, you counterbalance that with how catastrophic and horrific the consequences are of these wars and interventions. And I think if we just are very constant and consistent, as I said, I believe the truth will win out. And I encourage you, don't let yourself get burned out. Don't spiral down to where you're depressed or or so angry that it's burning you up inside. We have to stay strong. We have to know this is a long battle ahead. And so do what you have to stay healthy mentally and emotionally and physically, but never give up. Just keep going. And we love you. And so we're going to end this evening with a little bit of
Well, just
shisha.
remember, if you're speaking the truth in love and you're talking to somebody who's just blowing smoke.
We love you all. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'll have this on YouTube tomorrow if you weren't able to join us over the course of the evening. Have a good evening, and especially a special hi and hello and all our love to people in Syria and Yemen and Palestine and Iraq and Iran, all around. We're with you there in spirit.
What do you say? Shalom, farewell, goodbye, adios, until next time.
Good night.